Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all to the second lecture on the course Management, Organizational Policies and Practices. Before we start with the contents of the second lecture, I would like to have a recap on the first lecture. So in the first lecture, which was on the introduction to management, the main contents that we discussed were about the functions of the managers. We discussed in great detail that the managers are involved in 4 basic classical functions, but the managers nowadays are performing some functions in addition to those classical management functions because of the requirements that are imposed on the organizations of being more responsive to the environment, and because of the global changes taking place in the all over, which are hitting the organizations. So the different different functions that the managers perform, we discussed. When we combine the old and the new management functions, we come up with mainly planning, organizing people and processes. Leading is another function performed by the managers, controlling, global management, and innovation and change. So they are the major management functions performed nowadays. Then we have old versus new management styles. We had a discussion on how the management style varies from the classical period. There is a paradigm shift in the style of management. We also discussed the various kinds of managers. So they can be top managers, they can be middle managers, they can be first line managers, and they can be team leaders. So at these 4 different levels of managers, they have varying responsibilities. So the responsibilities of managers, we discussed that they vary according to the level of the managers. So the highest level top managers, they have different kinds of responsibilities, such as they're more responsible for the making of the vision and mission for the company, for the making the strategy of the company, for giving the signals of positive organizational culture to its employees downwards, and to exhibit such changes themselves in their own behavior, so that they can take positive commitments from the employees. So the top management is responsible for this kind of behaviors, to produce that kind of signals that can enhance positive organizational culture and that can attain commitment from the employees. We discussed all this in detail. Then we had a discussion on how the role of the middle management changes. Middle management is basically responsible to communicate the long-term strategic vision of the organization, which has been developed at the top, to the lower managers or to the first line managers. So the first line managers and the subunits, they are directly reporting to the middle managers for their performance, and middle management is responsible for the performance management of the different subunits and the different division that comes under their jurisdiction, and the different first line managers. Then we have the first line managers, who are directly responsible for the performance of the employees. So the first line managers are the managers who are managing non-managerial employees. They're managing shop floor workers. So since they're managing the direct task or the direct content of the job of the employees, so they are more responsible for the content of the job of the employees, and more responsible about the technical aspects of the job of the employees, for the performance of the employees on the shop floor. And of course, first line managers also have the authority to hire and fire the employees, and to keep an eye on other human resource activities or human resource functions or human resource requirements of their shop floor workers. For example, they are also engaged in their performance appraisals. They're also engaged in their compensation. They give recommendations to the HR managers for the compensation packages of the employees, or they're directly appraising the performances of the employees. They design the job descriptions of the employees, and so on. And then we have the team leaders. So team leaders are responsible only for the functioning of the team. So they are the facilitators to the team members for smooth functioning of the team and for getting the positive results from the teams in such a way that there is cohesion among the team members and there is no conflict arising between the team members within the same team, and the conflicts can arise between the team members across teams. So if 2 or 3 teams are working in an organization and their tasks are such that they're interrelated, it is very much the possibility that a conflict arises between the different teams. So it's the responsibility of the team members to resolve this kind of conflicts. Then we have the so these are the different responsibilities of these different kinds of managers. Then we also discuss the managerial roles, such as they perform various interpersonal roles, such as they act as figurehead, for example. Then they perform the role of they have various informational roles, such as they are the spokesperson on the behalf of the organization, and then they also have the decisional roles to perform. So we also discussed all these different kinds of roles that are performed by all these managers in the organization. Then the different managerial skills that are needed to perform the management task. We discussed that there are 4 types of skills mainly that an organization requires from a manager to perform his task, that are technical, human, conceptual, and motivation to manage. We also discussed that the composition of these 4 kinds of skills, they can vary according to the level of the manager. So for the top level managers, motivation to manage and conceptual skills can be more important compared to the lower level managers, such as the first line managers. For the first line manager, technical skill of course is more important because he has to take the he's responsible for the performance of the employees, so he must be aware of the technical aspects of the job. He must have the skills, the necessary knowledge to perform the job, because he has to take that job from the employee and he has to supervise the employee, right? And then the human skills, which are related to the management of the different workers, to the dealing with different workers. They might be blue collar workers or they might be white collar workers. So at all levels of management, people have to deal with them. So we expect that managers at all levels need to have human skills. They're equally important for the managers at all levels. So and then we also discussed the mistakes that managers commonly make, right? There are a number of mistakes that mainly managers make, such as they are sometimes more abusive, sometimes they're more arrogant, and they're not that empathetic towards their employees. They're not that listening towards the employees. They are too optimistic, and so on. We discussed a number of mistakes that the managers make and the kind of consequences that those mistakes can have for their managerial capabilities, or these mistakes take them away from becoming effective managers. Then we have the first year of management transition. We saw that how what are the expectations of the managers when they are just given the position of management, and then how their perceptions about their role as manager changes after 6 months, say, and then how it changes after a year. So there was a huge and very interesting transition from the perceptions of the managers day 1 and after a year. So day 1 they are more bossy and they feel that their only responsibility or their job is to get the work done, to get the task done, to manage the task. But after a year they realize that their major responsibility is to manage the people who have to do the work or who have to do the task. So then we also had a small brief discussion about the competitive advantage through people, how a bundle of human resource practices or the management practices, when they are exercised in an organization, they can lead to competitive advantage through people. How the people or the employees of the organization can actually transform into the human capital or human resource in the organization by exercising a number of management practices, such as selective hiring may be done. They might be trained and developed, right? And there might be promotion from within, and a number of other management practices that can lead to competitive advantage of the organization. So as I told you earlier that we are going to have a detailed discussion on the competitive advantage in the organization, how it can be gained through people, or what can be the different sources of competitive advantage, how it can be sustained, and so on. We'll have a brief, very detailed discussion on these aspects of competitive advantage in our next few lectures. So we are just advancing to those few of this topic, to this topic of competitive advantages is directly related to the strategy building in an organization. So so let's start from the for the today's lecture. I introduce you the topic of today's lecture, which is how management strategy develops. So here in this topic we are going to see that what are the different strategic development options that are available to an organization, and why the strategy in an organization, or why the management in an organization needs to be strategic in devising its objectives or its policies, right? So we'll be having a good introduction of what strategy is and what strategic management is and why management needs to be strategic. So we'll have a detailed discussion on these aspects in this during this lecture. So let's see what exactly you can expect from today's lecture. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to explain what is meant by intended and emergent strategy development. Then you should also be able to identify intended process strategy development in organizations, including the role of vision and command, strategic planning systems, and externally imposed strategies. Then identify emergent processes of strategy development, such as logical incrementalism, resource allocation processes, cultural processes, and organizational politics. We also expect you to learn and to consider how different processes of strategy development may be found in multiple forms and in different contexts. Then after we have discussed how the strategy in an organization develops, we'll be seeing the another topic in today's lecture, which would be vision and mission statement. So before a company actually forms its strategy, it has to formulate a vision and mission statement. We'll have a discussion on what should be the contents of the vision and mission statement, what are the important components, and what are the benefits of vision and mission statement. I'll also be giving you a few examples for better clarity. Okay, so these are the learning outcomes from today's lecture. Now let's start with the forms of strategy development. There can be two forms of strategy development: intended strategy and emergent strategy. So we start one by one with the intended and the emergent strategy development process forms, and the different processes that are involved for the development of intended and emergent strategy. Right, for the development of intended strategy, the processes are of course different than the processes that are involved in the development of emergent strategy. So processes before going to the processes of strategy development, let's first have a look on what is intended strategy. Intended strategy is an expression of a desired strategy as deliberately formulated or planned by managers. So from this definition of intended strategy, it becomes clear that intended strategy is a strategy that is already planned, that is carefully planned, that is well planned by the top managers and by the executives of the company, such as the CEO, board of directors, and the other top managers in the company. They design this kind of strategy. It is carefully designed, it is drawn up in careful ways, it is very systematic. It underpins explanations which are well grounded and explained. So it is supporting the different arguments are well supported in this kind of strategy, and the number of issues are prioritized. So there can be a number of strategic issues that an organization is having, but under this form of strategy development, as the name indicates, it is intended, it is fully planned, it is backed up by certain well-grounded explanations and argumentations, and also it is prioritized. with respect to the nature of strategic issues. Then also plan in terms of resource allocations, control systems, and organizational structure. So from the definition of this intended strategy, it should become very clear that this form of strategy is very well drafted, it is very well designed, and it is very well planned, thought of in all aspects. Also in terms of resource allocations, also in terms of control systems, what kind of controls will be used. As we discussed in our previous lecture, the control mechanism is very important in any organization, because control systems and the control mechanisms, they ensure the implementation of the organizational policies and practices, of the organizational strategies. So this kind of strategy also writes down what would be the different control mechanisms to implement the planning that is being done at the top level, right? And it is also written down in this strategy that what the structure the organization is going to follow. Okay, so what are the different processes that are involved in the development of intended strategy? If you look at this circle on the left hand side of this slide, you would see the different processes involved are strategic vision, leadership and command. Then we have the strategic planning, and we have externally imposed strategies. But other than this, we can also have the strategic workshops and concept of project teams. We can have external consultants which are involved in the processes of strategy development. Okay, so let's not touch the other two circles here. We get back to this slide again when we move to the processes that are involved in the emergent strategy development. So let's get back to the intended strategy development. I hope it is clear by now to you what intended strategy development is, what are the different aspects that this kind of strategy covers. So the key points from this slide are that it is developed by the top manager, it is fully planned, and it gives a full roadmap for the organization in terms of the resource allocations, in terms of the control systems, and in terms of the structure the organization is going to follow. So this is also clear from this that this type of strategy is written down. It is fully drafted, and it is a lengthy, long document. So let's get back to the processes in detail on the intended strategy development. There are a number of explanations on how intended strategy development takes place, on what process is involved in the development of this kind of strategy. So the first explanation is strategic planning. So it says that this kind of intended strategy is developed through strategic planning. So what happens under strategic planning is that initial guidelines are given to the managers in the organization. Normally, an organization has a corporate center, a corporate unit, and it has different strategic business units, which can be spread across the country, which can be spread globally, and which can be spread, or they can be just 2 or 3 business units, and there can be a number of much more business units, right? So what I mean to say here is that each strategic business unit has its own plan, it has its own strategy, right? Each business unit has its own product line, it can have its own market where it has to go, or which it has to target. It can have its own customer base, and these different aspects such as the product, the place, the customers, they make one strategic business unit different from the other strategic business unit. So different business units, they have their own plans, they have their own objectives, they have their own targets vis-a-vis their orientation. What happens is that for the development of intended strategy, strategic planning is done. This is one of the explanations in this process. So as per this explanation, how the strategic planning is done, or how we come up with a corporate plan, a strategic plan for the organization. First, the top managers, they ask the first line managers or the junior managers or the strategic business unit level managers to come up with their strategic plans, the plans for their business units, right? So what happens is that they formulate their plans based on a few guidelines that are provided to them by the top management. So these guidelines are certain assumptions about what are the expectations of the top managers, or what are the aspirations of the top management vis-a-vis the business of the organization, vis-a-vis the strategy of the organization. So the wishes of the top management are communicated to the senior business, to the SPU managers, right? And then also scanning of the environment is done, and a basic information about where the company stands and where what is the state of the art on the external environment, on the industry. That basic preliminary information is also provided to the managers, along with the wishes of the top managers on how they want to see the company or the line of business of the company, right? So these initial guidelines are provided to the SPU managers. The SPU managers, they devise their plans keeping in view the guidelines provided to them. Then they have face-to-face meetings with the top executives, or at the corporate center, at the corporate unit, at the corporate level. They have the meeting with the top managers or the top executives of the company. All the managers, they have these face-to-face meetings where they discuss their plans with the top managers. So then what happens is that the top managers or the corporate planning unit, it formulates a single document which is coming from the aggregation of all the plans that are coming from the different SBUs. The central business unit or the top managers at that point also communicate to the SBUs in their face-to-face meetings if any deletions or any additions are required in their documents, or any changes are required in their documents. So what the SBU managers do is that after those meetings, they revise their documents and they send back those documents to the corporate planning unit, and the corporate planning unit incorporates all those changed versions of the documents into one single document, and this is how the corporate plan is emerged, or the corporate strategy is emerged. Right, so one single document becomes the corporate strategy of the organization. So what happens is that the strategic business unit, the corporate planning unit, on the basis of that corporate plan and on the basis of the feedback that is being provided by the strategic business unit managers, they give them targets. They assign them their annual targets or their 5-year targets. They assign them the targets against which they will be evaluated, or against which their unit will be evaluated, right? So they give them the performance targets, they allocate them the resources. As I told you earlier, that under this kind of planning system or under this kind of strategy development process, all the everything is written down, everything is predefined. So the resource allocation is done on the basis of the plan, the corporate plan, on the basis of the targets given to the SBUs. Resource allocations are done on those bases. What will be the control systems, what will be the structure followed by the organization to fulfill those plans, that strategic plan. For the fulfillment of that strategic plan, what kind of structure would be required, we'll be discussing in detail in our future lectures. Organizational structure, and how the organizational structure is linked to the strategy of the organization, and how there should be an alignment between the two. Okay, so for now we see that on the basis of that plan, the SBUs, they receive their targets against which they are evaluated at the end of the year, right? And they are appraised at the end of the year on the basis of those targets that are given in the corporate plan. So this is how the strategic these are the different stages of the strategy development, strategic planning that we saw here. Then we see that what is happening actually is that this intended strategy, it is developed, or it is formulated at the top level, as we discussed here. It has been reported in literature, and it has also been seen through practical examples in the real lives of the organizations, that this kind of strategic planning processes or strategic planning systems, they remain often unrealized in practice. They are formulated at the top level, but they need to be implemented at the bottom level by the junior employees, by the shop floor workers of the organization, which leads them being unrealized. They remain unrealized. Why is that? Of course, in this statement there is an inherent answer. One, because we know that the top management is not involved in the technical aspects or in the operations or in the line of business. It is not directly involved in the line of business, that what line of business the company has, what are the processes through which the company is reaching at the product or the service that it is offering to the customers. The top managers do not exactly have the idea of what processes the company follows or what processes the employees follow in making the final, bringing the product into its final shape or the service to its final shape. It is the employees who are going through all those processes, and it is the employees, it is the junior workers who are actually directly interacting with the customers. So the kind of knowledge on the technical aspects of the product that the employees have, the top managers do not have, right? The experiences that the employees have, the top managers do not have. So often it has been reported that the strategy that has been made at the top, it remains unrealized because the employees at the lower level, they feel that that strategy document that has been prepared is only a bookish document. It does not have much relevance to the ground realities. In other words, they feel that the plan is not workable in practice. Other than that, it could also be that we know that the environment is changing at a very fast pace. There are increasing challenges that have been faced by the organizations. So the environment, it is possible that you have planned out a strategy, which is a very cumbersome process. It is a very long time taking process. Strategic planning, it is a very time-taking process. As the process I explained to you in the previous slide, you could also gain the idea that it is very time-taking process. So by the time you have developed your planned your strategy, there might be the environmental change, which is making the strategy that you have developed a little obsolete. Then there can be influence of influential people or stakeholders. They may not be going along with the plan. They can be for example, your first line manager who is responsible for getting the strategy implemented. He may not be in favor of implementing the strategy. There can be a number of reasons for that. Maybe he has some vested interest because of which he does not want the strategy to be implemented. There can be other powerful stakeholders that can also lead the strategy not to be implemented. So these are some of the number of reasons which can lead to the non-realization of the intended strategy. This is just a cartoon from Wall Street Journal that where the top executive of a company is saying that I plan strategically, therefore I am. So it is just, this cartoon was taken to show you in a light way the importance of strategy, or on the importance of managing strategically, of thinking strategically, right? So he says that he is existing, his company is existing only because he is thinking strategically, only because he is planning strategically. Then intended strategy development process, the second explanation to the development process of intended strategy is strategic workshops. We have given one explanation of this intended strategy development process, which was strategic planning, that this intended strategy is developed through strategic planning. Second explanation is it is developed through strategic workshops. Strategic workshops, the concept of strategic workshops basically is, as we saw in the previous slide, that the intended strategy often remains unrealized because it is coming from the top and the followers to the bottom, and the people at the bottom, without any feedback from them, they are asked to implement that strategy. So they do not mainly own that strategy because they feel that that is too unpractical, or that is not meeting the requirements of their business or of their processes. Strategic workshops, the concept of these strategic workshops, it is relatively new. What happens in the strategic workshops is that if they can be called for a number of reasons. For example, if the management wants to reconsider its strategic plan or its intended strategy, then it can call for such strategic workshops. And in these workshops, a number of or different layers of management they can be involved. That is the concept of strategic workshops. So the people who are specialist people who are who have the expertise in the area where the strategic issue comes from, they can also be involved in the strategic workshops. The top managers can be involved in the strategic workshops. The middle managers can be involved in the strategic workshops. First line managers can be involved in the strategic workshops. Even the employees can be involved in the strategic workshops. And the external consultants, they can also be involved in the strategic workshop. So it depends upon the nature of the strategic workshop who will be exactly involved in those workshops. So as we discussed earlier, that the purely top-down management system or management planning process, that is unrealistic. So group of top executives, they make discussions from function line managers and other low-level management, and their direct personal experiences about company operations, customers, etc. are shared. That is the benefit of these kind of workshops. So such workshops, they could also intend to examine existing strategy, right? So they can also one of the objectives of this workshop, or these workshops can merely also be called keeping in mind the objective that to challenge the assumptions of the existing strategy if that is required. But of course, they should be backed by some sound arguments, and they should be the process should be very systematic. So if you have called for the workshop to have and you have this kind of objective in your mind, then what you can do is that in this kind of workshop where you want to challenge the assumptions of the existing strategy, you can also call the external consultants, you can call the lower level managers, you can even you can also have the top managers. But even if you don't have the top managers, with the help of some experts in the area, you can make a document and give your recommendations to the top management. Then another objective of the strategic workshops can be to examine the blockages to strategic change. We'll be discussing in detail in our future lectures as well, and we have briefly touched upon in our previous slide that people are normally resistant to change, right? So what are the different blockages, or what are the different hindrances, or what are the different shynesses that are involved that are main barriers for the people to change? They serve as main barriers for the people to change, right? So these workshops can also help to highlight those barriers that serve as blockages to change, and by having a discussion on that kind of barriers, we can actually help remove those barriers so that change is possible, strategic change is possible in the organization. Then another objective of holding this kind of workshops can be to monitor the progress of strategy, how your strategy is doing, right? Getting feedback from various levels of workers, from the different experts, from the technical experts, from the line managers, from the employees. You can have the idea that how your strategy is progressing, and to generate new ideas which may otherwise remain surfaced. Of course, the more people you have within your workshop, in your team, and the more diversified those people are, the more, that is, they are coming from more different levels. Also, you have the lower level workers. You can have more and more ideas which can otherwise remain stifled, and they can be a big hurdle to innovation. So the workshops also provide a platform to the people to share new ideas, and those ideas can thus be surfaced with the help of these kind of strategic workshops. Then we have the third intended strategy development process, which is the external consultants. What is the external consultants? They play a very important role, because sometimes what happens is that as I told you earlier, that the top managers can be faced with a number of strategic issues, and sometimes there are also disagreements between the management at higher levels on what issue is of more strategic nature than the other issue is, right? So it might be difficult for the top managers to prioritize the different issues sometimes, and we of course need to prioritize our issues. We need to prioritize our requirements, because we have limited resources, because the organization has limited resources, so it has to prioritize the strategic issues, the nature of the strategic issues as well, right? And it can be difficult because sometimes the disagreement can arise between the managers. So what the external consultants can do is that by hiring the services of the external consultants, the managers or the organization at the top can have a fresh view of the different issues that are of strategic nature and that are facing the organization. And the external consultants can help you prioritize your issues. They can help you analyze the situation. They can help you to provide the different strategic options. They can also help you resolve the disagreements that can arise during the process between the managers. Other than that, consultants can also provide the services of coachings and trainings which are associated with the strategic change, and they can promote the same. That is, they can be helpful in promotion of strategic change by providing the necessary coachings and trainings to the employees and to the other levels in the organization. Of course, the external consultants, they can provide more objective view because they are looking at your organization from an external eye, right? They can provide you more fresh, and they can provide you more unbiased and objective view of the different issues that the organization is facing. Okay, of course, external consultants, they can provide you very informative advice, very valuable advice. They can be really helpful in designing the strategy of your organization, because of course they are experts, and also they are the knowledge carriers. We also need to keep it in mind that they are the knowledge carriers because they are serving various organizations. They're working for various organizations. They're providing consultancy services to various organizations even within the industry in which you are operating, in which your organization is operating. So they have a very good idea of what the external environment is, what competition your organization is facing, where your organization is standing, and they can provide you advice accordingly, right? So they're also the knowledge carriers. I would here like to give you a very famous example of McKinsey and Bain, which is one of the leading consultancy companies in the world. What they did was that once they provided a consultancy service to the Swissair about their strategic policy, they asked the management of the Swissair to purchase the stock of some troubled and small airline companies worth $2 billion. What the company did was that upon the advice of this very well-known air consultancy company, they purchased the shares of those troubled and small companies. And the view was that it would lead to the expansion in the aviation services which have been provided by the airline. The strategy actually backfired, and the company had to file bankruptcy. It could not work. So this example leads me to this cartoon. So what is happening here is that he's saying, I don't know, we asked the consultancy firm for an organizational chart of Chrysler and GM, and this is what we got. Sometimes the advice by the consultancy firm may not work. It is very much likely that it can happen because consultants are also providing their expert opinion, their expert advice on this. These are the strategic options that can be available to the organization. If it exercises this kind of options, if it goes to this direction, if it adopts this direction, if it hits this kinds of markets, this kind of customers, then it might be successful. If it goes for acquisition, it might be successful. If it goes for divestment, it might be successful, right? But it is not necessary that the consultancy that is provided by the consultancy firm to the organization that proves successful, because there is of course ambiguity and uncertainty in the environment after all. The consultancy firm even cannot predict the external environment or how your strategy is going to react externally. Even the consultants cannot be very sure about. They cannot be 100% sure. So the strategy may even not work even if you have taken consultancy services from the external specialists, from the external strategy specialists. So this is what happened in the case of Swiss Air that I just told you. Then we have the externally imposed strategy, which is another process of intended strategy development, another explanation of how intended strategy develops. As per this approach, the strategy is developed in an organization by the external factors, or it is the external factors that are dictating the strategy within the organization. So those external factors can be very powerful stakeholders, such as the government, the regulations by the government, the regulatory bodies of the government. So for example, government can impose regulations on public sector, or it can also choose to deregulate or privatize the public sector firms. The firms who are operating in the public sector, it can privatize them because of a number of reasons. So here what is happening is that because of the government strategy, because of the government policy, because government imposing certain regulations, the organizational strategy has to be in line with the strategy that has been given by the external agency or by the government. So here what is happening is that the strategy is externally imposed. It is not of the firm itself. It is not developed by the senior managers in the company themselves, right? And similarly, as you would be familiar that we have in Pakistan Security and Exchange Commission. It is a number of regulations that any company which is operating in Pakistan, it must fulfill. It must be registered with SCCP and it must fulfill the guidelines that have been given by SCCP. Similarly, all the banking industry in Pakistan, it has to fulfill all the commercial banks in Pakistan, they have to fulfill the guidelines which are given by the State Bank of Pakistan as well as by the Security and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. What is the minimum amount of reserve ratio that the banks need to keep, the banks need to maintain, in which sector of the banks, how much lending can banks make to the commercial units, how much lending it can make to the corporate units, how much lending it can make to the individuals, right? So this kind of regulations, they are often imposed by the externally regulated agencies on the organizations, which the organizations must follow in order to carry on their line of business. So this is what this view says, is that the strategy is externally imposed. So we see that intended strategy is entirely planned, right, and it is written down. There are a number of benefits of having this kind of strategy. First benefit is it helps structured analysis and thinking about complex problems, right? It encourages questioning. When the managers, for example, they are asked to write on a plan for their SBU, right? So they question themselves about the basic assumptions, about the certain assumptions in the organization, and they then try to design the strategy, right? And it also enhances the coordination between the different business units. When they are meeting at the corporate center, there is a strategic direction that is being given to all the different strategic business units, although they might be operating in different lines of business, but the strategic direction is the same for all the business units. So it also improves communication between within the organization. It provides agreed objectives, right? And it involves people, and it provides a sense of security to the people or to the workers in the organization, right? So then there are a few dangers which are associated with the strategic planning programs, such as detachment from reality. As I told you earlier, that the strategic planning or the planned strategy or the intended strategy that comes up, there is a top-down process that can sometimes be detached from the reality, right? Because the ground reality might be different. I just explained it to you that because there is minimum involvement of the lower level workers in development of this kind of strategy, so it might not be what the real case is, as a result of which that strategy may not be owned by the employees at the lower level. Then dampening of innovation. Of course, when you are not taking much ideas from the people at the lower level, there are lesser chances of innovation, and then there are also lesser chances of innovation when you are you are just giving a few certain directions to the employees, to your workers, that how they have to work, what are the objectives that they have to meet, in what direction they have to work, what are the different controls that would be exercised, how their performance will be appraised against those objectives that have already been set by the organization. So it will lead to an inflexible work environment, and under inflexible work environment where you do not have any autonomy, where you do not have any power to exercise your own will, to exercise your own ideas, of course the innovation is likely to dampen. Then managers, they see responsibility. Sometimes it happens is that when the line managers, they are given the task or they are asked to give their input in the strategic planning process. So what happens is that since it's a very hectic and it's a long-term process, so sometimes they try to take the help of external consultants, right? And then what happens is that sometimes that becomes only merely an intellectual exercise. Of course, external consultants, they have their expertise, they are the knowledge carriers, but they may not have that good knowledge about the organizational processes as the internal managers themselves have. So it may remain merely an intellectual exercise. Then it has often been reported that there is information overload from developing or designing this kind of strategy, because the first step in the strategic planning is gathering of information, scanning your environment and gaining the information from the external environment. So sometimes maybe the managers, they collect so much information from the environment that they lose track on what information is strategic for them. Then the emergent strategy development is the second form of strategy development. So the emergent strategies are those strategies that are realized in the organizations, and as the name indicates, that these strategies, they come through everyday routines, activities and processes in the organization. These processes and activities in the organization then give rise to long-term direction, which becomes the strategy of the organization. So emergent strategies are those strategies which are emerging, as the name indicates, from the day-to-day activities and day-to-day processes taking place within the organization. There are again a number of explanations on how this emergent strategy develops. So the first explanation is logical incrementalism. So logical incrementalism means that strategy does not change fundamentally but incrementally. So unlike in the strategic planning process on the intended strategy, you have one set of document which is the strategic plan of the company, and after 10 or 15 years you have another set of document which is another strategic plan of the company, and there might be fundamental changes in the two plans. But here under the emergent strategy development, as per this explanation, logical incrementalism, when your strategy is developing or when it is emerging, then you are basically responding to day-to-day changes, to the day-to-day activities in the organization. You are developing by experimentation, you are learning from partial commitments, you are specifying your precise objectives, not like you are doing in the planned strategy development. In the planned strategy, you have very clear and very crisp and very specified objectives, but as I discussed earlier, that that kind of objectives, they stifle the innovation, they stifle the flexibility of the organization, they stifle the experimentation, right? So here what is happening is that you are learning from your day-to-day activities, you are learning from your partial commitments, you are learning from day-to-day experimentation, you are basically responding to the day-to-day changes taking place in the external environment, to the day-to-day challenges that are posed by the external environment, and that is how you are learning, and that is how you are constantly and incrementally changing. So one strategic move evolves from the previous, such as a new product launch may guide future strategic decisions such as market development, right? So what is happening here is that you are learning step by step. You are taking one move, and your next move is guided by your previous move, right? So you launched a new product, and then in the next step from that move you learned that, or you experimented and you learned that now you can enter into a new market in the next step. So effective managers, of course, how this strategy is realized and how the intended strategy is unrealized, because we see that there are few limitations of the intended strategy, right? Effective managers, they are reported to realize that of course they cannot avoid uncertainty completely about the future, so they need to constantly scan their environment, and they need to constantly respond to the environmental changes by taking steps that are small, but by taking steps that are effective, which will make their strategy effective when they will be constantly responding to the environment, right? And then it also helps build people's psychological identification, resulting in less resistant to change. So here what is happening is that this strategy is giving basically a room to the people at the lower level to exercise new ideas, to exercise the innovation, to respond to the external environment changes. They do not need to take approvals from the top management for every change. They can make those changes themselves at the lower level, and thus they can more identify psychologically with this kind of strategy. They can more identify with their organization, and they can be less resistant to change. Of course, when they are taking small steps, with small changes in the organizational strategy, in the organizational processes, in the organizational policies, when the very small changes are taking place, then it is not a big change for the employees themselves. Then the environment within the organization, culture within the organization is not really changing, and it is easier for the employees to adjust to those small changes. So that is why this kind of strategy, it remains realized. It is to a large extent. Then we have another explanation to the emergent strategy development processes, which is the resource allocation routines. The resource allocation process, basically what happens here in the resource allocation routines is that it says that realized strategies emerge as a result of the way resources are allocated in the organizations. So, for example, if one manager wants some new product development, and he launches a proposal for that, right? And the SBUs of other managers, they also some of them send proposals for the new product development, and some of the SBUs, they send proposals for the new market development, right? And what happens is that there, of course, all the managers, they are backing up their proposals with certain financial ratios, with certain derivatives, with certain financial trends, and with certain forecasts, and with certain historical facts. All these projects, they will be backed by all this information. They will be analyzed, all these projects, and those projects will be approved, which in the direction which the organization wants to take, right? So the project, for example, which focuses the new market development, that might be approved, and the project that focuses new product development, that might be declined. So in future, what will happen is that it will keep occurring. Resources will be allocated more on the projects which wants more market development than the projects which want the product development. So so this will also be a strategic direction of the company. The resources will be allocated in that direction in which the company wants to go, right? So here in this case, the resources will be allocated on the new market development, and that would be the direction that the organization actually wants to go strategically. Then we have another explanation, which is the cultural processes that the emergent strategy might develop with, or another explanation of the emergent strategy development, which is the cultural processes. So organizational culture that might be understood as taken for granted assumptions, at the routine that is set within the organization, the set behaviors within the organization that the employees are following since years, and the behaviors that they well understand are expected and desirable, and the behaviors they refrain from which are unexpected or undesirable. So as per this explanation, the emergent strategy develops because of these certain controls by the organizational culture. Right? So for example, if the manager in an organization feels that something needs to be changed in the strategy of the organization, but that is not in line with the organizational culture, then that manager might be resistant to implement that strategic change because of the resistance that is anticipating from the employees, because that is not in line with the organizational culture. So what he would be doing is that if the performance of the organization is falling as a result of the mismatch between the requirements from the external environment and the organizational strategy, so what the manager will do is that he might try to increase the performance of the organization by making more stricter controls and applying more stringent checks. But if even that does not work, then change of strategy might occur in line with the culture. For example, the manager realizes that he needs to expand in new markets. So what he would be doing is that he would bring a change in his strategy. He would try to expand in new markets, but in those markets which are similar to the markets in which they are already doing their business. Right? So, so that there is not much cultural change, or there is not much change in the expectations from the employees, or there is not much change in what the employees have to do, so that they are not much resistant to the change in this strategy. So as I already told you that the managers need to change, it might be hampered by strong cultural norms. Although the managers fully realize that they need to change, then outcomes of change in strategy guided by culture may not encapsulate environmental change, and strategic drift might occur. What happens is that if the managers with the fear of resistance from the employees, if they are not implementing the desired strategic changes in their organization, they might have to face strategic drift. And strategic drift is where strategies progressively fail to address market challenges and performance deteriorates. So where the rate of change in the external environment is much faster than the rate of change with which the organization is responding to those environmental changes, then the cultural drift is likely to occur. Then we have the organizational politics, that is another process in emergent strategy development. As per this process, it is the political political views, or it is the political strengths of the different stakeholders in the organization that decide what is going to be the strategy of the organization. So there are certain political powers of the top executives which they exercise in certain strategic directions which are in their own vested interests, and they come up with the organizational strategy as per their vested interests by exercising their political powers. Right. So as per this view, there are different political parties, there are different top managers. They might have different political motives to serve their own vested interests, and there might be negotiations and there might be compromise between those managers, and then the strategy might develop. So what happens is that these top managers, they try to keep hold of organizational resources and they want to protect their interests. Right? The rational and analytical processes in strategy development may not be as objective. Right? As we discussed earlier, that you do the environmental scanning and you're doing all kinds of your analysis, and then you're developing your strategy. It is a planned process. It is very systematic. Here it is stated that the strategy development is entirely a political process to serve the vested interests of the top managers, and they're saying that it may not be that rational and it may not be that analytical process of strategy development. So objectives set in organizational strategies may reflect ambitions of powerful people, and different organizational managers seem to protect their own views in approaching strategic problems, and political activity may result in incremental or emergent patterns of strategy development. So we have seen the multiple strategic processes. We have seen the two forms of strategy and the multiple strategic processes, and what we can conclude, or what are the implications of for the management from this discussion, is that there is no one right way of strategy development. When we are talking about the intended strategy or we're talking about emergent strategy, they are not mutually exclusive, right? One organization can have part of intended strategy and it can have a part of emergent strategy, right? But what kind of strategy an organization is going to adopt, it mainly depends upon the context of the organization, the context in which the organization is operating, right? If it is, for example, operating in very turbulent environments, where in very dynamic environments where there is great external environmental uncertainty and ambiguity, the organization, it might be more appropriate for the organization to have the emergent strategy processes, because emergent strategy is more flexible. It gives you more chances of innovation, right? It gives people more and more identification with the organizational objectives, right? And it is more realistic and it is more realized, right? And it is more responsive to the external environment by incremental changes that take place in the organization in response to the changes taking place in the outside organization. But if the organization is operating in a very stable context, for example, the oil companies, if we take the example of Shell, it has a strategy. It follows this intended strategy plan, right? And its strategy is formulated for around 15 to 20 years. So it is very long-term strategic plan for itself, and you know it's a very top of the line oil company, right? And it's very successful oil company, right? But it's following the intended strategy plan. So it depends upon what kind of environments if you are operating in. If you're operating in very stable environments where the investments in the oil companies case, you know, you also have very long-term investments, so you have to formulate strategies for the long-term period, and the environments are also largely stable, right? And you can also make your forecasts, and you can also take help from your from the historic trends. For example, in the case of the healthcare industry, in the case of the schools, what is the number of schools that you need to open, how many healthcare centers you need to open, you can easily get a forecast from the birth rate in the or the population rate in the country. That what is the population growth rate in the country, right? And you can, from that you can draw out how many schools you need to open in future and how many healthcare centers you need to open in future. So it really depends upon the context in which the organization is operating, that which process is more suitable for the organization. And again, if an organization is following a strategic planning process, it is not that some political views won't be included in it. The political views of the managers at some level, they would still be there in that strategy development process, right? And similarly, there might also be some opinion from the external consultants at the same time in that strategy development process. So the multiple processes are actually working within different organizations. We cannot really draw a line between the two strategy development forms and between the multiple strategy development processes. Again, the strategy development, the perceptions, they also vary according to the managerial positions. For example, the top level managers, they might view strategy development as a very analytical and very planned activity. But the middle level managers who are not directly involved in the strategy development process, in the strategy development, they might view this strategy as very as a political activity, as a cultural activity. And those employees who are engaged or who are a part of the family businesses, they might view strategy as developed by the owners. The employees in the governmental organization, they might view strategy as externally imposed by the government agencies, right? So then we see that there are multiple processes at work, and the organizations are more successful the more they adopt these multiple processes. So we have already seen what are the different implications of these strategic processes for the management, and what are the challenges that the managers may face when it comes to the strategy development. The challenge that we saw was that of mainly of strategic drift, that the companies may fall in the strategic drift. So what is the answer? What is the solution? How the companies can get out of it? By Learning organization is the answer to this. Learning organization is an organization which is capable of continual regeneration from the variety of knowledge, experience and skills of individuals within a culture which encourages mutual questioning and challenge around a shared purpose or vision. So the different tenets of learning organization I would like to briefly touch here, because we'll be discussing more about learning organizations later when we'll have a more focused topic of learning organization. So here we see that learning organizations, basically the concept of learning organizations is that they promote organizational learning, right? It has been reported in the literature that the explicit and implicit knowledge of the people is much more than the knowledge of the organization, or than the knowledge that is there in the organizational memory. So the managers should make an environment which is conducive for the employees for knowledge sharing. They should encourage social networks, they should encourage knowledge sharing between the employees, so that they can discuss the different opportunities, that they can discuss the different weaknesses in the organization, the different opportunities in the external environment, or which they can tap, right? And they can challenge the different assumptions, and they can promote their ideas and lead to more innovations, lead to more being more proactive and responsive to the external environments. So learning organization could be an answer for making employees lesser and lesser resistant to change, and for making them becoming more flexible and realizing them the importance of being flexible and more acceptable of change. Okay, then we'll be discussing the vision and mission statement also. Let's see the vision. What is the vision? I'll read for you the vision of IBM here. The last thing IBM needs right now is a vision. What IBM needs most right now is a vision. What is a vision statement? It is agreement on the basic vision for which the firm strives to achieve in the long run is critically important to the firm's success. So vision is, what do we want to become, or where do we want to see ourselves? So it is the statement more about the long term, in the long term where you want to see yourself. An example of a vision statement: a national organization which represents its members in all aspects of poultry and eggs on both a national and international level. This is the vision statement of US Poultry and Egg Association. 90% of the companies, they have used a mission statement in the previous 5 years. So what is a mission statement? It is what is our line of business, in contrast to the vision statement, which says that what do we want to become. They're also called, mission statements are also called enduring statements of purpose, and they distinguish one firm from another, declare the firm's reason for being, and essential for effectively establishing objectives and formulating strategies. What is the importance of formulating the vision and mission statement? In the vision and mission statement, they have been reported to enhance organizational performance. They have also been reported to, it has been reported that the organizations that formulate vision and mission statements, they have 30% more returns on their financial measures than the organizations that do not have a vision and a mission statement. Some of the researchers, they state that there is no direct relationship between vision and mission statement and organizational performance, but definitely there is an indirect relationship between the two through employee involvement or the managerial involvement in the formation of the vision and mission statement. So you need to have a clear vision and mission statement before you can actually formulate your organizational strategy or your organizational policy, and before you can actually implement it. How these statements are developed? The process is more or less similar to the development of the strategy that we discussed earlier. So what happens here is that, again, the managers, all the managers in the organization, they are asked to read different articles on the vision and mission statement in esteemed journals, and take an idea from there, and then develop their own vision and mission statement for their companies, for their own business units. Then they all gather together with the committee of top managers. They have a meeting, and again, the top management, after reviewing the different documents, the top management asks the managers to make some deletions or additions if that is necessary. Otherwise, those documents from all the different managers, they are aggregated to form the vision and mission of the company. Before finalizing this document, the top management, it may take help of external consultants who may give some expert advice on drafting the language of the document, right, and or some other expert advice on formulation of the document. After that, the document is finalized, it is communicated to all the employees at all levels in the organization and all the different stakeholders of the organization. There can be different ways of this reporting, but it should be effectively reported, right? So some organizations also videotape the vision and mission statements. So what is the importance of a mission statement, or what are the benefits from a strong mission statement? It leads to the unanimity of purpose. It specifies organizational purposes, objectives of being of the organization, right? Then again, mission is the basis of resource allocation of the organization, because in the mission you also have what in line of business in which you are operating, the products in which it is all stipulated, it is all clear what is your line of business. So as per that, it helps in the allocation of resources. Then it also sets a general tone of our organizational climate, right, where the organization on the whole is going to move. What is the strategic direction of the organization, that is also coming from the mission statement, and then it is the focal point for all the employees. Again, during the formulation of vision and mission statement, there might emerge some divergent views among the managers, right? Just as we discussed that there might be some divergence among the managers, or some conflict might arise between the managers when it comes to the formulation of the strategy of the organization. Here again, such as in a university, one professor might want that university should more focus on the research, another professor might want that it should be more focused on teaching, and another professor might want that it should be a mix of both, right? So they have their different opinions on what strategic direction the organization should take. All the kinds of disputes or all the kinds of divergence in views that arises between the managers during the formulation of these this vision and mission statement, they should be resolved before the company advances further, or before it develops its strategy, so that the vision and mission statement basically serve a document that from all the members, from all the managers in the organization, where they give their consent and where they are agreeing to the one mission of the organization and one vision to the organization. So all the disputes between the managers, they should be willfully resolved, and then the organization should move forward for the strategy development and implementation. Here again, you can take help of external consultants to solve this kind of disputes. So what are the different components of effective missions? They are broad in scope, they are not limited in scope, right? So that there remains flexibility. Generate strategic alternatives. They reconcile interests among diverse stakeholders, right? And they are finally balanced between specificity and generality, not too specific and not too general. So effective missions, they basically arouse positive feelings and emotions. They can also enhance the identification of the employees or the different stakeholders with the organization, right? And generate favorable impression of the firm. They reflect future growth. They provide criteria for strategy selection, right? On the basis of these mission statements, organization formulate their policies, their strategies, basis for generating and evaluating strategic options, and they are dynamic in nature. So what are the different elements that a mission statement must entail? One, it should cater to what your customers are, right? Whom you are going to serve, the products and services, which products you are going to deal in, which services you are going to deliver, the markets, which markets, local market, you are going to deal internationally, you are going to deal globally. It should be very clearly specified in your mission statement. Then the technology, are you technologically current? That should be there in your mission statement. Then what are your ideas about survival, growth and profit? That should be there in your mission statement. Then your philosophy, what are your basic beliefs, what are your ethical beliefs? That should be there. That is an important component of your mission statement. That should be an important element. And then the self-concept. What is your competitive advantage? What are your different strengths? On what basis you are going to compete? That should be there in your mission statement. And the public image, of course, that how you are environmentally responsible, how you are answerable to the environment, how you are socially responsible, right? And what environmental concerns do you have? And then it should also state something about the employees. What are your concerns for the employees, for the growth of the employees, for the personal needs of the employees? These are the different elements that effective vision statements they need to entail. They need to have all these elements. So with this we come to the end of our today's lecture. I hope the lecture was informative. I hope it was helpful for you to understand the various concepts relating the managing the strategic management in the organization, and development of vision and mission statements, and the importance of vision and mission statements. I thank you all. See you again with the third lecture for this course. Allah Hafiz.